Here, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, is personally announcing that sovereign wealth funds are buying Bitcoin and have taken advantage of the low prices at 80,000 and so on to get into Bitcoin. All the theories we've had, like the big players suppressing Bitcoin prices to get in cheaply, could now be confirmed, and by none other than him right here, Larry Fink in his latest interview. This clip just surfaced here. That was the interview, which I already briefly quoted this morning. Now, new clips have surfaced here, and it's not just one country involved here, but a number of sovereign wealth funds that are now building up Bitcoin holdings through BlackRock's Bitcoin ETFs. At the same time, we have a major headline coming straight from the Kremlin, directly from Russia, where Bitcoin is now set to be officially classified as an export commodity. Apparently, such large sums of Bitcoin are flowing here that something needs to be changed. This whole thing is a report from a Kremlin official. That would only further support the thesis. We have news from Jack Mallers & Co., who now wants to compete with Strategy, wants to accumulate more Bitcoin just like Strategy. And he has now announced that he will be trading on the New York Stock Exchange. We'll take a look at when this is happening, why it's relevant, what's going on with the Bitcoin price right now, what's happening, folks. Extremely, extremely relevant. But before we dive right in, folks, just take a quick second. Hit the like button for me down below. Smash that button for higher Bitcoin prices and new all-time highs. As a thank you, I'll show you my living room lamp. Bitcoin price today, pretty inconspicuous. We're still kind of at a crossroads. Okay, are we heading back toward 100,000 now? Or are we actually still in for, let's say, a bit of a correction phase? And this whole thing was actually a bull trap that we've just walked right into? And I saw a really interesting report from Unzings, who's a Bitcoin analyst here. He writes here, in my 10 years as a Bitcoin enthusiast, I've never experienced such a positive market environment for Bitcoin. Still, the price development was incredibly disappointing, which makes the whole thing even more interesting. Within just 1 week, we got news that Texas became the first state to buy Bitcoin, and Vanguard is now allowing its clients access to Bitcoin ETFs. If this had happened in 2017 or 2021, it would have been the biggest news. If this had been the biggest news of the cycle, it would have been enough to significantly change the market sentiment, followed by a massive move in the Bitcoin price. And now we're getting one positive headline after another, and hardly anyone cares. I can easily imagine that all of this will come back to bite us at some point, and that in 2026, we'll see Bitcoin rise louder than ever before. The demand from all institutions, ETFs, nation-states, Bitcoin treasury companies, and so on will only continue to rise next year. And combined with the substantial regulatory progress, all of this seems inevitable. Then you also have the end of the Fed's QT program and falling interest rates. The starting position looks fantastic. What a time to be alive. And I'm very grateful to be sitting here in this Bitcoin lifeboat. It's also the speculation of a whole lot of people. Yeah, is the Bitcoin price being suppressed here because we have so much positive news? It just can't be that we're trading this low. There must be some manipulation going on. And that would fit with what Larry Fink is saying here. While a lot of people here got cold feet, nation states have been filling their pockets and aggressively buying up the dips. Now, listen up, please, to Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock. Attention.
We're seeing more and more legitimate long-only investors investing in it.
Kind of like Michael Saylor, who just want to buy and hold Bitcoin, not short it, but simply just hold it here. Bitcoin, the price, how do you say, price action? They want to write it up.
There was an article about a foundation, endowment just bought a lot of IBIT. But I can tell you there are a number of sovereign funds that are standing by. They're adding incrementally at 120, at 100. I know they bought more in the 80s.
I am aware that they acquired a much larger quantity of these assets further back in the 1980s. However, it is undeniably and exceptionally interesting to observe that Larry Fink, a prominent figure, is now making this information publicly known and discussed. And by the way, sitting next to him is also the CEO of Coinbase, who has said several times that large sovereign wealth funds are accumulating Bitcoin. Binance CEO, or ex-Binance founder CZ, has also said this before. That means everyone who has anything to do with buying or selling Bitcoin here. And major platforms, they all report the same thing. There are big countries, states, sovereign wealth funds operating in the background. They're really lining their pockets here. So I really wonder, when will the USA finally get on board? They want to become the Bitcoin superpower. They don't want other nations to beat them to it.
That's fine. They're establishing a longer position, and then you own it over years. This is not a trade. You own it for a purpose.
Bitcoin isn't just for a few days or something, they're really in it. They're taking positions for decades, for the long term. Bitcoin isn't something to trade, it's a long term investment. And that's a pretty bold statement here from Larry Fink. And yeah, I know, you always have to look at it critically. Larry Fink, I just got messages about him again earlier, like, yeah, Larry Fink is cool and all, he's pumping the bags and stuff. But of course, there are also risks involved in all of this. Of course, you can't underestimate these risks. Centralization and a lot more. And I actually read a really interesting comment about this. And honestly, it's just really spot on. If Bitcoin really does win in 2026, I hope you all remember the trolls and complainers who laughed at us all year long. This year on X showed me just how many people enjoy watching others lose. There are accounts here whose sole purpose is to pray for the downfall of Sailor and MicroStrategy. I hope they kept the receipts. Well, you're never supposed to hold a grudge and all that, but you can't help but feel a bit happy then, because that's when all the know-it-alls come out of the woodwork. Oh yeah, Bitcoin is gonna fail, and Michael Saylor, and this and that and the other thing, and everyone piles on, and some even turn it into a business model, like Peter Schiff or Maurice Hofgen or whoever. Marcel Frascher would be another example, but at some point, it just backfires. Eventually, it just blows up in their faces, especially when we get news like this now. Check this out, we've been speculating about this for a long time. When will it finally happen? When will it finally happen? Now we've got Game On, see you on the New York Stock Exchange, and Tuesday Bitcoin. So next week, Jack Mallers' new company, along with SoftBank and Cantor Fitzgerald, will launch here, 21 Capital. It really took a very long time for them to get approval to trade here. That's why I'm even more curious now to see what comes of it, because Jack Mallers just goes into interviews and says straight up, yeah, Michael Saylor was cool and all with what he did, but that was really just the beginning. We have completely different opportunities with Cantor Fitzgerald. Artel is also involved. We can build new financial infrastructure, and we can definitely accumulate more Bitcoin, like Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor did a pretty good job with that. That was kind of the starting shot, and now it's our turn. So I don't really think Jack Mallers is just a total windbag either. Of course, he's a marketing guy and a good salesman, and so on. But usually, when he says something, maybe there's a bit of hot air in there, but not 100% hot air. But that's why I'm really curious to see if he can actually build up any significant holdings, so to speak. I mean, they're already starting with 50,000 Bitcoin or so, or maybe even a bit more. I don't even know exactly. So with a significant amount, they'd have to accumulate almost another 600,000 Bitcoin now to catch up with strategy. And then we're still at the point where, okay, big sovereign wealth funds, big countries, and so on are secretly buying Bitcoin in the background. And this news here fits that exactly. Here, Kremlinos, Bitcoin mining as an official Russian export. Kremlin advisor, Bitcoin mining supposed to officially become a Russian export product. A high-ranking Kremlin advisor is demanding that Russia's crypto mining be classified as an export, since tens of thousands of Bitcoins and import payments need to be accounted for in trade data. And there was also a very interesting article about this. You can see it here, it'll be linked below. And there were some really fascinating assessments about the whole thing. This means that Russia now sees Bitcoin mining as an unofficial export sector, one that is growing rapidly but is barely reflected in official statistics. As a result, forecasts for the ruble are being massively distorted, according to the article. In other words, Bitcoin mining is already influencing Russia's currency market. Here, Kremlin advisor Maxim Oreshkin, this is him here, says that the money flows from mining have become so large that they now measurably influence the ruble exchange rate but do not appear in the balance of payments. The result, the ruble behaves unpredictably because a major export stream doesn't officially exist. This is about so-called hidden exports, mining as an underestimated economic sector. Oreshkin calls mining a new export item that is undervalued and operates outside traditional financial channels. Companies can now also pay for imports with Bitcoin, which further distorts demand for the ruble. Then we have the next point here, regulation, but it's barely regulated. Russia has legalized mining, but only a third of miners are officially registered. A large portion operates in the shadows and sells coins on foreign exchanges, completely bypassing Russian statistics. Russia wants to exert more control over Bitcoin mining. A balance of payments item for mining is supposed to be created. Russia's testing a crypto export-import model through an experimental legal framework. The central bank wants to allow banks to work with cryptocurrencies and offer crypto derivatives in the future. That means we have some very interesting assessments here. This is also something that's on a lot of people's bingo cards, that Russia will eventually announce, yes, we have a massive amount of Bitcoin. There have always been contradictions about it. It's banned, it's not banned, blah, blah, blah. Then, at one point, there was an official green light. But then they said the general public isn't allowed to have it. Only central banks, and major players are allowed to have it. That's kind of like in China, where they didn't really make it appealing to the public, so to speak, but the big players still used it anyway. Maybe the state even kept it for itself. Something similar could happen in Russia as well. They definitely have significant mining operations going on here, but somehow it hasn't really caught on with the general public yet. And that's basically the bet a lot of people are making, that large Bitcoin reserves are being built up in the background here, without the public benefiting from it. But that's also due to game theory, because of course you don't want to be the nation that shows all its cards and says, hey, look at our Bitcoin mining facilities here. We're buying this much Bitcoin every month. I mean, El Salvador does it publicly, but a lot of nations just don't make it public. We saw the same thing in Bhutan. What happened in Bhutan? They've somehow been running Bitcoin mining there for 5 or 6 years already. And then sometime in 2023 or so, it came out, hey, they've been doing this since 2017. Bitcoin mining. That's the nation with the most Bitcoin per capita in the entire world. And that only came out 5 years later. Came out. And so I also assume that's how it will be with many other nations, like Russia, for example, or the countries that are now buying all the Bitcoin ETFs from BlackRock. They're not making that public either. So what we have here is Bitcoin mining that's happening in the background. We have Bitcoin accumulation that's taking place in secret. And now we definitely have several sources like BlackRock, Coinbase, former Binance founders, and so on. We have multiple sources all confirming that, yes, sovereign wealth funds, sovereign wealth funds are starting and so on. They have Bitcoin mining programs or Bitcoin accumulation programs running in the background. And that's why the question is, are you in on this or are you missing out entirely?